listeners. Thanks for tuning in to episode 5 of the Being Brilliant podcast. In this episode, I spoke with Senator Malcolm Byrne. Malcolm is a member of the Oireachtas Committee on Tourism, Sport, Arts, Media and Culture. We talked about his hometown, his motivation to enter politics, and he outlined to me what he believes are the biggest issues facing Ireland today. I hope you enjoy the chat, and as always, I welcome your feedback. So, Malcolm, you're very welcome here to my house in Gorey. I've moved here back in July last year, and I have to say I think it's a great place. I really like it. And you're actually from Gorey. You were born and bred here.
I've a passion for Gorey. I'm biased. I love the place. I grew up here, went to school here, live here. It's a wonderful place to live, to work, to study, to do business. If you come to Gorey from outside the area, there's over 50 places that you can sit down and eat, from your chipper basically to fine dining. We've excellent schools, we've a cinema, we've a theatre, you've all your major supermarkets, you've a range of boutiques in terms of buying men's and women's clothing. It's it's a fabulous retail town. There are good links to Dublin. You're an hour and under an hour to the M50. I think it's the quality of life here is great. There are lots of sports facilities. You're very near the sea. You're not far from the Wicklow Mountains. I think it's an ideal location. I'm biased, but I love it. And I think part of it is just how quickly the town is continuing to grow. When I was a teenager, the town maybe had a population about 4,000. We're now more than triple that. So it's continuing to grow, and it's a very welcoming place. Mm-hmm. And we've always, as local politicians, done what we could to protect the main street, not just as an economic hub, but as a social hub. And people who come to Gorey notice about, how vibrant the centre of the town is and the retail offering that's there. I think Gorey and Maynooth have the two towns with the lowest rates of commercial vacancy anywhere in the country. Mm-hmm. So I think we've protected that. It's always been a good business or market town. Mm-hmm. So if you go into one shop in Gorey and you're looking for a particular item and you can't get it, they'll tend to recommend another shop somewhere else in town who may be able to stock it. So, anything you want to get, you'll be able to get it if you come shopping in Gorey. Mm-hmm. I always think that there's a lot of great clubs and voluntary organisations, and it doesn't matter whether it's sport or the arts or community activity. There's a real vibrant spirit. And then when you have big community activities like the Market House Festival or like Christmas and the switching on of the lights, people come out in town. They come out to support it.
Yeah, and I imagine there's actually so many people involved who help put all this together. There must be so many civic-minded, socially minded people in Gorey putting everything together. Like, I think of the town park. That is fabulous, and that's been renovated recently. So I was lucky that was open just before I came. It's got so many amenities. I mean, it must have taken a lot of efforts, a lot of maybe fundraising, a lot of people coming together from different agencies to make something like that happen.
Well, the town park was an initiative of Wexford County Council,
okay.
and I was on the council where, it was a deliberate decision in terms of ring fencing some of the income from property tax, and the council putting money in behind it to renovate, what was an adequate park, but to make it even more inclusive, to improve drainage and so on. And I think it's a fabulous facility. So you have that, but then even within the park, you have a lot of voluntary activity and engagement going on. So you'll be familiar with Park Run that happens there every Saturday morning. But I just even think of, around town, the full range of even just on sporting clubs. So you go from the traditional big three where you have soccer, rugby, GAA, but then you also have cricket, hockey, athletics, boxing, tennis. We've an American football team here locally. You've a whole range of the martial arts. So, anyone who wants to get involved in sport, There's a sporting code that's there. There's a really rich artistic and creative tradition within the community here. You've Gorey School of Art, which, both helps students in the preparation of their portfolio for art college, but indeed offers very specific training about, where they want to go. You've lots of choirs. We've a wonderful theatre, an award-winning theatre group and musical society in place. You've poetry groups.
The list is endless.
And that doesn't happen without voluntary activity, and people are rightly proud of Gorey, and I think every little person who volunteers and gives of their time, it makes the town a better place.
Yeah. So a lot of that might not have been in place when you were growing up. Do you see a huge difference? I mean, I want to know what was life like for you growing up in
well, a lot of it was. I mean, Gorey was always a very good business town. It was obviously smaller, and there was always a really good community spirit. I mean, there were there were community leaders, people who were willing to get involved.
Yeah.
There wouldn't have been the diversity of activity that was there, but certainly a lot of the organisations, they go back, and you can often see generations who've been involved in particular organisations.
Yeah.
And I mean, I always say to people, have a look at the St. Patrick's Day parade in Gorey, which is one of the biggest parades in the southeast. And even if you look at just all the organisations and groups that are marching in it, that'll give you a flavour of what North Wexford has to offer. So no, I think it's always been there. And because it's such a welcoming community, new people who want to come in, and particularly if you want to get involved or even set up something new, there's a support and an interest in doing that.
Great, brilliant. So definitely a proud Gorey man in front of me here.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love where I come from.
Yeah.
And it's great to see the town going from strength to strength.
Yeah.
There are always going to be challenges.
Yeah.
But I think there's been an attitude in the community of, well, this is a great town. North Wexford's a great community. Let's solve whatever problems we have.
Great. Okay, so let's talk about your career. You went to university to study law. What was it about law that attracted you?
I think in school I enjoyed, subjects I enjoyed were English and history, so you kind of had an interest in words and how, and consequently how decisions were made.
Yeah. And
I became fascinated really around how, decision-making processes worked, and really enjoyed. I mean, I never practiced law as such, but having a law degree is a very good basic degree. Lots of people use it to go on into other areas. But I found it very beneficial. And obviously, in politics, having an understanding of the law makes quite a difference.
Yeah. Do you remember being in school and being asked to fill out the CAO college application form and putting law as one of your choices?
Yeah, law was. I mean, the other career, curiously, I had because I was okay at art and had an interest in sort of design and stuff. I did contemplate architecture as well.
Oh yeah.
For a while, but no, law was my first choice.
Yeah.
And I wanted to go and study law at UCD, and was fortunate enough to get the opportunity, and it was a great experience. A lot of my closest friends are still those who I would have met in UCD.
Yeah.
And the college life experience was not just the formal academic stuff, but being involved in a lot of aspects of college life, really made a difference.
Yeah. Did you know then you had a career in politics ahead of you?
Well, I was certainly interested in politics.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's almost, a natural correlation between law and politics. It's politicians who make the law. So I was always fascinated by by that aspect of what I was doing. I do remember coming back, after my first year in UCD, and I was very young. I started in UCD at 17. But I do remember coming back, the following summer, and I did a week's work experience in a local solicitor's office. The late David Warren, who was a wonderful man, who was asking me about what I enjoyed in my first year, and I happened to remark constitutional law, and he just looked at me and said, well, that'll be F all use in the district court. He took very much about the practicalities of things on the ground. But yeah, I had a great time being involved, and while in UCD, then I got involved in student politics. I was education officer with UCD Students' Union, and then education officer with the Union of Students in Ireland, and really saw about how, by getting involved in a campaign to change the law, to make a difference in certain areas, you could, and had a number of small successes at that time. But it convinced me, not that I suppose that I needed convincing, but it convinced me even more about how politics can make a real difference in the lives of people.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember telling your parents that you wanted to have a career in politics?
Well, they knew I was interested from when I was quite young.
Were they encouraging?
No, my mother never wanted me to go into politics. Mum would have much preferred if I had pursued a more conventional career, and perhaps being a solicitor or a barrister. But they've been huge supporters. They've always been being very strong supporters, and I guess I don't come from a party political family, but certainly growing up, around the kitchen dinner table, you'd have discussions about what was going on in the world, and we were encouraged to have our own opinions. And if you felt annoyed about something, well, what are you going to do about it? And even still, at family gatherings, there'll always be a discussion about things that are going on, either nationally or internationally. And my parents were both, very involved in activity in the local community. They had been on school boards of management. My dad was a founder of Gorey Rangers. Was treasurer of the Scout group. Mum was chair of community games, for a long period. So, they've been involved in a lot of community activity. So that kind of spirit of volunteerism was just seen as natural at home. And but I've always been grateful for their love and support, and they've always backed me in politics, and even now, to the point they'll switch on Shannon's TV and Oireachtas television and watch some of the contributions.
Right. So would they have been watching the RTE 9 o'clock news, and would you be discussing it as a family, or would they have been interested in current affairs?
Yeah, you'd either hear the news but you'd read the newspapers during the week, and like we were always encouraged to read as well, which I still think, and I love seeing it with I'm even conscious with my young nephews at the moment who really love reading, and I think one of the greatest gifts that you can give to any child is an introduction to reading or an ability to read, because it opens up whole new worlds for you. So we were always encouraged to read that, and I while I read a certain amount of fiction, I always got into non-fiction, and I still read a lot more non-fiction probably now than fiction.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And just going back again to your family and your parents, would you have been aware of what their political leanings would have been, or like were they conservative or were they liberal, or even to this day are they a sounding board for you, or do they ever disagree with you on policy issues or things like that?
Yeah, and we'd often have around the family dinner table, and friends would be the Byrne household and would notice kind of some of the discussions and debates around it. And with my siblings, we'd debate on issues. So but it was always encouraged. You'd always be respectful of somebody's opinion. I would probably, it's probably fair to say on certain issues I would have probably been a little more conservative. I probably, and then on others, yeah, I'd possibly be a little more liberal. So they wouldn't, my parents wouldn't necessarily have been, dogmatic. It was really about, engage in the issue and, how do you go about solving the issue. But on most things, on most things, I mean, we'd agree on a lot of things, but they'd certainly be very supportive of, the idea of dialogue, and that, by getting involved in politics, you make a difference.
Yeah, brilliant. And I'd imagine, like, politics, it's not an easy industry to be in. I mean, you really have to not be too sensitive. I mean, there's a lot of toxicity out there at the moment. How do you protect yourself from all of that?
So there is. So I mean, I always defend politics. It's a noble profession. It's about making decisions for the betterment of your community, your country, the globe, and the overwhelming majority of politicians that I know get involved for the right reasons and want to make a difference positively. There's always going to be a few who will use it for their own benefit, but I think most just want to make a difference, whether it's about one issue or whether it's about things in their community or more widely. I've there is a difficulty that there are negative people that are out there, but I've a sort of in my head that 5% of people are going to be negative, and it doesn't matter if you're in business or anything else. You're always going to be encountering people who are negative, who are going to knock, who are going to seek to bring down. 95% of people are positive, want to get on with things, mightn't always agree with you, but are respectful and understand the importance. And I think we sometimes worry too much about the 5% of people who are negative, and maybe we need to spend more time engaging with the 95% who are positive. I certainly think social media has made politics a lot more toxic. It's some of the online commentary is pretty horrific. And I think there is a greater responsibility expected of social media companies to act on that. But equally, the small number of individuals who are involved in that, who think that it's all right to engage in torrents of abuse online, particularly when it's the kind of behaviour they certainly wouldn't tolerate in the offline world. And it's having a harmful impact on our politics. It's making it more polarised. It's frightening good people away from becoming involved, and that is concerning. And while as politicians we often develop thick skins, it's often those who are close to us, our families, those we love, those who work with us, who will see some of this stuff written, and they become far more concerned. So I think we need to stand up for politics. Democracy is a very fragile thing, and we've got to respect and fight for it, and that means standing up to the online trolls, those who just want to seek to drag us all down to their level, who want to polarize. And as I said, there's also responsibility on the tech companies, and the era of self-regulation, it does not work, and that's why we have to step in to address all of the online harms for which they're responsible.
Yeah, I think it's getting worse and worse. For that reason, I definitely do not have an X account, formerly Twitter, because there's just, I think the shorter the medium space to make a comment that cannot be expanded or elaborated on, the more danger there is. But there's so many keyboard warriors out there now that it's not just politicians, of course, they're attacking anybody that they don't like, and they're saying things that they would not say to your face. Do you find that people will say things to you in an email or a text that they would not say it to you in your face?
Yeah, well, I think I've often reflected. I think that if I wasn't in politics, I'd probably be off a lot of social media. I think LinkedIn is possibly the only thing I'd stay on, and that's only really for career purposes. I'd certainly agree with you. I think X in particular has,
Yeah.
and especially since Elon Musk took it over, it's become a cesspit. Over 20% of accounts on X are fake accounts or trolls. I think it's deeply concerning that X aren't looking to try to address that. And you're not going to get, I mean, don't get me wrong, I mean, there's elements of X that I find useful, that, you know, you can get quick news bites or up-to-date information, or just even, you know, funny stuff. There's a lot of positives, and, you know, there's certain elements of social media are really good. But X is not a place if you're going to have a serious evidence-based debate. I mean, I always worry, you know, where people think that the answers to complex problems can be sorted in
a couple of sound bites.
A couple of sound bites, or, you know, a couple of hundred characters. You know, it's not. You know, there are very few issues that are totally black or white, and you know, you nearly always, and this is particularly a challenge for legislators, is, you know, how do you deal with nuance? Social media faces those challenges, and when, I mean, we're worrying obviously about, you know, some of the online harms, but, you know, the polarization of our politics is part of that. I sit on the Oireachtas Committee on Tourism, Sport, Arts, Media and Culture, and one of the areas that you know, we've been involved in is the whole question around online safety. And we went through a lot of work on what became the Online Safety and Media Regulation Act, which set up Commission Nimian, which is the media commission, or the regulator for this space. It's probably going to be the most powerful regulator in Ireland very soon, because it's regulating everything from the traditional media space, so like your radio and TV, but now to all of that online space. And, you know, how you balance the very important rights to freedom of speech and ensuring that we have freedom of expression within our society, but at the same time dealing with a lot of the online harms that are out there. So how do you protect children and young people from potentially very dangerous content? Where do you draw the line? You know, and this big debate that's going on around hate speech. I mean, it's very important that you allow people freedom of expression, but at the same time, when that trips over into incitement to violence, as we've seen, and where that is amplified in many cases by social media, you know, where do you draw the line? And that's a challenge for us. I've certainly been concerned that while some platforms are making efforts to address some of these challenges, others are not. And I think this is really where there has to be regulation, because the first obligation of the state is the safety of its citizens, of those who reside here. So, you know, in on our streets, you know, we expect to have Gardaí, we expect to have police, you know, to provide us with safety. There are rules and regulations about how we live our lives to ensure that everybody can be safe. And similar rules and guardrails have to exist in the online space.
And of course, the problem with the online space is it's huge. It's just everywhere. Beforehand, and, you know, if somebody libeled you in a written publication, there's only so many written publications, but there is so much online space. It's just a vortex, and you're cleaning up after it's happened, in a way, aren't you? Like, that's a problem. It's already, the damage has already been done, and the bullying has already happened, and you're trying to clean up afterwards, and that's...
Well, I mean, for schools now, that's one of the, you know, the biggest challenges, and you know, principals and teachers will talk about it, that, you know, in the past, if there was an instance of bullying or, you know, kids being harassed, it happened within the school walls, and, you know, the child went home and he or she would feel relatively safe. But now, because of what happens online, and we've seen it, you know, kids are being constantly bullied, and you know, if we don't look at how we manage this, particularly in an era of artificial intelligence where we're going to be dealing with deep fakes, misinformation, disinformation, our whole concept of what is truth is going to be challenged. That does place an obligation on legislators and regulators. It certainly places an obligation on the tech companies, those who are designing the platforms. But I think also there's a responsibility on all of us to educate ourselves. And I think that has to be part of the formal education system as much as anything else, but so that people understand, so they know what an algorithm is, how it works. How do you know whether something is real or not? Where can you go if you think something is a deep fake or you think something is false? Where can you go to check it out? I think this is where trusted, trained journalists, fact checkers can play a very important role, because we are consuming more content. We are getting more information now than at any time in human history. And we've got to be able to distill what of it is truthful, what of it is valuable, against what of it is false and just seeking to exploit us.
Yeah. I mean, we know right now that it's so dangerous for us. There's a lot of danger in social media, both in our overconsumption of it and in the content itself. So given that, and until the time in which we can make it safer, in the meantime, do you think we should have restrictions over what age people are allowed social media accounts?
Well, I think this is this is one of the big debates, at what age. Well, there are two elements. One is at what age people should have access to certain materials, and then obviously age verification requirements. One thing I suppose I'll say to you is about some of the simple ideas and solutions. Kids and teenagers are smart enough to be able to get around a lot of those.
They've always, for millennia up to now, right?
So I think working with the tech companies, it is important that we have that. I think there's also issues around how we manage mobile phone use and other because, by the way, this isn't just for kids. Like for a lot of us, it's an addiction, the scrolling function. As I'm sure, we're sitting looking at our phone, we think for 2 minutes and half an hour has gone, and
really sucks you in, doesn't it?
It does. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of good to social media around sharing of ideas, and if you're part of a community online, you can learn stuff. It's great for how do I do? Let's put up a YouTube video and it can show us. So there's a lot of goods that's there, but it's about managing time. And Education Minister Norma Foley has been moving towards voluntary bans around around smartphones in schools. To me it makes a lot of sense. Because in order to ensure kids' concentration levels, but also that we don't become addicted to mobile phone use.
Yeah.
I think that we're going to face more challenges with regard to technology, and particularly with both the opportunities and threats posed by artificial intelligence, how it's going to be managing many more aspects of our lives. And again, I think we need to have those public debates about where and what we should regulate. How does it operate? We need as individuals, as humans, to both control it, but also to understand it.
Well, I can tell you now, Malcolm, I think I'm addicted to my mobile phone. I really do. So I've started a self-imposed curfew, 6 p.m. most nights. I put it away. I charge it, out of sight. And I've taken Facebook off my phone. I only have Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn for professional reasons, but obviously, as you said, I connect with people, I find out what's going on, there's all the good stuff too, but I feel that I am a very visual person, and there's something about the way my brain works that just gets sucked into a visual stimulation. So, I think I'm worried about my mobile phone usage. So how do you get away from your mobile, get away from work? What do you do for fun? What do you do for crack? What do you do for your well-being?
So there's probably two things. One, I I like to run, so if I want to clear the head, just go out for a short run. As I mentioned, I'm quite involved. I was involved with, Park Run when it was being set up in Gorey in 2016. And like, it's great every Saturday morning. There's a great community of runners that are there. But even, when I do a few distance runs, I kind of like that. I like going to theatre and to arts events. I particularly love going to see a new play, or even a play I've seen before and somebody's interpreted in a particular way that makes me go, wow, okay. So that's something I find. And it was actually during COVID when I didn't have access to the arts, when I didn't have access to theatre and music and stuff. I realised how much I missed all of that. Yeah. And I was kind of even slightly depressed during COVID when, suddenly those things which made life so vibrant, and go and see an art exhibition, that it all disappeared. I love to travel. You can read about something in a book, you can see it on a screen, but there's nothing like physically being in a place and experiencing it, and all your senses being challenged, and something like that I love, and it often gives you a very different perspective on life. People I've worked with have always worried about when I go off on holidays, because they say you come back with ideas, and
is that because you've had time to think, or is it because you've seen how things are done differently?
It's probably a mixture of both, because our lives are so busy and we're constantly doing things. We sometimes need time to step back and kind of, okay, let's look at this in a different way.
And then sometimes we appreciate our own country, we have somewhere to compare it with, right? It's not always greener somewhere else.
No, it's not. And I love Ireland, and don't get me wrong, like, there are problems and challenges here, but I think we should appreciate we live in a beautiful, open, free, safe, relatively safe liberal democracy, that is a broadly welcoming place to be. So I think we sometimes should appreciate that and celebrate some of what we have, particularly when you see what's going on in other parts of the world, and the horrific events in the Middle East, with the terrible invasion of Ukraine by Putin. When you see the rise of authoritarian regimes in places like China, the poverty and some of the problems being experienced in sub-Saharan Africa and in parts of Asia. We should appreciate what we have.
We have such privilege because we've never in our lifetimes, I'm similar age to you, we've never grown up in a war zone.
Yeah.
Now we've had troubles, in our own country, but we haven't had full scale occupation where we're living.
So, but if you think about the troubles in the north, I mean, to me, if somebody says, give me one example of politics working, I mean, the Good Friday Agreement was a triumph of politics. It took the gun, for the most part, out of politics on this island. That's not to say, and I think what people have to remember is it's still a peace process. The peace process is ongoing. The absence of violence does not mean we're at total peace, and there's a process of reconciliation and so on that's still going on. But I mean, the great thing is now is that anybody, almost everybody under the age of 40 has no concept of the troubles that engulfed this island, from the late 60s through the 70s, through the 80s, into the 90s, horrific events. And yet there's a whole generation of young adults now who have no concept of that. That for them is part of history. And that is transformative. Now we still have, we don't forget about that. There were a lot of victims. They need to be remembered. There is still a process of reconciliation between different traditions that has to go on this island. But the absence of violence is, so much better. And when you look at conflicts in other parts of the world, I think Ireland has done something quite well there.
Yeah, absolutely. Wouldn't it be great if the Israeli situation in Gaza, if they could learn from what we've been able to put our heads together and come up with solutions,
Yeah, I found it interesting when so obviously in 2023 was the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, and I was at a few events and listening to various speakers, and Bertie Ahern made a really interesting point about any peace negotiations, because he often he's asked, as well as others around, what are the lessons from the Good Friday Agreement, and he made what I also was a very interesting point. He said that once you go into the discussion and once the parties say to you, this can't continue anymore, when they don't know what the final destination is, but just there's a realisation we can't continue with the status quo. And that was what happened, in the North and in the relationship between Ireland and Britain. There was an acceptance, look, just what had been going on was horrific. And I would hope, out of all of the horrors that are happening at the moment, that there's now finally a realisation we can't just allow the Middle East to continue in the way, that it has been going on, that there has to be, new solutions found, and similarly to other conflicts. And when I think of, some of those who in Ireland, often they were lone voices, people like John Hume and Seamus Mallon, who were preaching those messages, often in very difficult circumstances. But it was that realisation, what is now can't go on. And I think our challenge and this is a political challenge more generally, and I like to try to do it with any difficulties. I kind of go, well, what's the solution, right? So what's the final destination? We can't sort of see beyond what's happening right now, but where would we like to be in 2 years, in 3 years, in 5 years' time? And in order for us to get there, what do we need to do? And I think that's going to be, part of the challenge with some of the global conflicts as well.
Yeah, so at the time of the Good Friday Agreement, that was the biggest issue of the day at the time. Moving to today, what do you think the biggest issues facing Ireland are right now?
Well, domestically, it's housing.
So glad you said that.
Yeah. So without doubt, it's it is the number one political issue. I'd make the argument it was why my party Fianna Fáil went into government was to get on top of housing. If you think about the state has been, the population of the state has been growing. We hit 4 million in the 90s. Our population is now about 5.3 million of the state. Some of that is immigration, but a lot of it, in fact, is either domestic population growth or indeed Irish people coming back to live here. So we did a decade of undersupply, and we're only now getting back to starting to build and supply more homes. So without a doubt, the number one issue that we need to address is housing. In terms of bigger picture issues, and I suppose things that your listeners might think about, that not quite things that keep me up awake at night, but where I think we need to be conscious, because they really have the chance to revolutionise everything about what we do. One I mentioned earlier, which is around technology and advances in artificial intelligence, and AI is going to transform everything we're doing, not just AI, but other, we're living through a technological revolution that is quite profound. You're looking at AI and other technologies in healthcare, which can now pick up diseases and tumours quicker than the human eye or any doctor and solve them. We're, going to have debates around medical genetics where, by genetic modification, we're going to be able to potentially eradicate particular diseases and so on. But obviously there are going to be ethical questions we're going to have. So that all of those technological changes, there are going to be huge swathes of jobs that will no longer exist, but there will be new employment forms that will come into being. So how do we upskill and reskill people to avail of all of that? And AI is already being used in so many things that we have. So that technological piece, and we need to educate ourselves and stay on top of that, I think is profound. I certainly think, the climate change and the biodiversity crisis, we always have to be aware of what's happening in that space. We can see that there are changes happening in the climate. We can see, species that are not seen normally in Ireland or in Irish waters are starting to arrive here. We're seeing the ice caps melting, in the Arctic and Antarctic circles. And that's going to have implications. We're not sure what all of them will be, but, we're seeing more strange weather events in Ireland and globally. The loss of biodiversity would be huge for food production, for agriculture, for our life generally. So that is obviously a big picture question. And the other thing, we've also got to be very conscious of is demographics. We are all living longer. And that's, that is going to have a profound change. We need to think about how we design our towns and cities for an older population. What impact does that have on the economy and the workforce? I happen to be aware that on current statistics, 1 in 5 teenagers today will live to the age of 100. 1 in 3 babies born today will live to the age of 100. So
wow, is this recently?
This is on.
Where did you see those?
So this is some research that's being done. I was a PhD researcher in Athlone. That and I just thought this is some amazing stats. But if you think about it, in life expectancy in Ireland, up until the 80s was to about 70. The early 70s. We're now into the early 80s. By 2050, we're probably going to see life expectancy of about 90. So, a student who's doing their Leaving Certs this year, most of them will be working until about 2070. Most of them will live till around 2090, and a fair number of them will live into the 22nd century. So, they're going to see all the technological changes. They're going to have the impact of the climate changes. But then, the other element that you got to be conscious of is, because they're living longer, how do we ensure that they have healthy lifestyles so they can live healthily while they're continuing on to those ages?
As long as they don't have to work until they're 90. Please tell me I don't have to work till I'm 90 so that I can afford to live in this country.
No, well, I don't believe, you shouldn't force anyone to. But I mean, I don't have a problem. I think you shouldn't be forcing people who work if you want to work.
Brilliant. Yeah.
And I know a lot of people who are very capable and either as in a professional basis or, there's a lot of older people who volunteer and are very heavily involved in the community, and our community couldn't survive without that contribution of older people. No, I don't think I don't think we should be forcing people to. It does lead to there is that challenge of the pension ticking time bomb because we're now having more pensioner people of pensioner age living longer, and then fewer workers to be able to support that segment of the population. So that's a huge economic challenge that's only growing, and we're going to have to deal with. So we're going to have to look at how we manage that. But I think one of the things that's critical in part of that is around how we also ensure that we have a healthier older population, because one of the challenges is, even though we're living longer, if toward the end of days, people are not in good health, that becomes a bigger challenge.
Mm-hmm. So what is old age going to look like for you? Now, personally, I feel shortchanged if I don't see at least 80. I think, if I continue to live well, maybe I'll see 90, I don't know. But do you ever have an idea in your head, all going well, all things considered?
Well, unlike, say, in American politics, I certainly don't envisage myself being involved in politics in my 80s or 90s. So I would certainly hope to be retired then, but I could still see myself being involved in, whether it's the theatre or out running or walking, but I'd certainly like to be an active octogenarian.
Well, you've done 31 marathons so far, right?
37.
30, excuse me,
Yeah,
37.
sorry. Yeah.
Do you remember your first one?
Yes, so Dublin 2007.
Oh, I did the Dublin one. It's the only one I did. I did it in 2005, I think. So, yeah. And then what was your last one?
The last one was Dublin last year. So I've done every Dublin since 2007, including the 2 Dublin marathons that were during COVID, which, were virtual marathons.
Oh my gosh, very good. Now, let's imagine you're going to be running many more. You're going to go for maybe another 37 marathons. You're going to live a long life. You're going to be really healthy. You're living well. But the day will come, Malcolm, that, death is coming for you, as it is for all of us. There's only 2 things we can guarantee in this life, as they say, death and taxes. Have you thought about your funeral? Will it be, I'm not sure if you have a religious persuasion. Would you prefer a celebrant-led funeral? Have you thought about your funeral and maybe what people will say at it?
No, not really, to be honest. I haven't. I mean, the only thing I guess is I'd always hope that, and it's how I often look on funerals, is that in many ways they should be a celebration of life.
Yeah.
And a celebration of a person's contribution and so on. And I mean, I always laugh, I always like when, at somebody's funeral, the jokes are told about something funny that the person did or said or that they enjoyed. And, when you hear laughter at a funeral, because it is about celebrating at their life generally. I get, there are other funerals that, are difficult circumstances and so on. So I haven't really, other than I hope that people have a good party and enjoy themselves. And if I've made some sort of positive contribution either to the community or to their lives, on a personal level, that they'll celebrate that and enjoy that. I don't want people to be unhappy.
Yeah. Would you have a religious element? Would you have prayers? Would you have readings? Any songs in particular?
I probably would. As I said, I haven't really given much thought about it. I mean, I think I struggled to accept, that and I still say I'm only moving toward middle age. So I don't want to kind of think about end of life. I think I kind of finally accepted that I was moving to middle age when I found myself for 2 Fridays in a row sitting in, having a glass of wine, watching the Late Late. That to me was the definition of 2 Friday nights at home. And I know then it was also when I was out with a gang of friends, we ended up discussing pensions one night over dinner, and I'm kind of thinking, guys,
you've reached a point
we've
now,
definitely moved. No, I just hope, look, you never know the day or the hour, but I just hope I keep going for as long as I can, and that I'm as healthy as I possibly can be. Because I certainly think that there is a spiritual dimension to all of our lives. That we've been brought up Catholic, and I think that there's still a lot of elements of Christianity that to which I'd adhere. I would have disagreements with the Catholic Church on a number of issues, but I still think that there is a role for religion in society, and I think it's I admire anyone with a strong faith. I probably have a kind of a personal faith more than anything else. And I certainly think too, an AI is not going to be able to replace that sense of creativity, that sense of spirituality, that sense of those things that make us human. And I do think that has to be centered within all of us.
Right, yeah. So you're not too worried about dying yet, and you've got plenty of living ahead of you.
Yeah, I'm not. No, I haven't really given it too much thought. It's yeah, look, who knows when it might happen and so on. I just hope that I'll have led a good life whenever it does.
That's it. Don't we all? Don't we all? Was there anything else you wanted to cover today?
No, I think that's a pretty much a roller coaster ride in my life and interests and beliefs.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you very much, Malcolm. It's been great fun.